Regional work became more complicated as we got going. We started branching off into other things, and there were other things that took our attention, but also the culture that we were serving had really changed. And establishments and institutions and everything became highly more questioned. Now we're in what people in systems theory would call a complex system. And that is that there are so many competing interests and so many competing ideas in terms of even what a region should be, that the system has to reorganize itself. And systems do reorganize themselves. Churches do, we see it all the time. Systems can reorganize themselves, but it starts with our assumptions. It starts with our very assumptions. So if our assumption is we as a team are going to develop a plan and we're going to tell the region what that plan is and everybody's going to get in line with it, then we're not going to be creating something that's going to be doable in this complex organization, this complex system that we're a part of. However, if we go to the level of understanding that complexity and begin to engage in spirited permission giving, then you start having things like young clergy groups pop up, mission work in, where is that church?
Independence Boulevard,
Independence
Micah
Boulevard.
Ministries.
Yeah, those kinds of, the Micah Ministries. You have all these things starting to go, and the region becomes then the conduit that helps to flow people to that. And it becomes, the system reorganizes itself from the bottom up rather than the top down. And that's what I hope that we're really going to be starting to work on in terms of systems, and our understanding is how do we create the image from the bottom up so that this system will find a way to reorganize itself. Case in point was the New Church Movement. When we started in 2001, it used to be a top-down process. The region would provide money, we would call a planter, they would go in the field, they would start a church in the place that we told them to start a church, and the kind of church that we told them to start. When we flipped that upside down and made it a spirited permission giving, started giving people like Terrell permission to go in and just whatever you're doing, that doesn't look like the kind of church that I grew up in, but God bless you, you're doing the house church thing, you're doing a whole bunch of things, you're reaching some people we can't reach. I mean, by doing spirited permission giving, then we begin to flip this thing upside down, and we begin to be the hands and feet of Jesus in a way that we never thought we could. And that's what gets me excited about the church.
Well, a few weeks ago, somebody shared a definition of empowerment with us, that as opposed to it being granting or restoring power to people that it's been deprived of, it's creating an environment where they're able to achieve fully the giftedness that God has given them, reach their full potential. And I think that's the thing that we've got to do at the regional level and at the congregational level if we're going to really get to the point of thriving again. And that's essentially what you're saying, I think, is that it's not about coming up with programs and policies. It's about creating an environment where people can do what God's calling them to do.
Yeah, we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but those are two very popular words. And then I would like to add this word to our definition or our thinking. If we're thinking about the region, let's think about ways to inspire people, not motivate people. What's the difference between motivation and inspiration?
One comes from in, one comes from out.
That's right, absolutely. Motivation comes from outside. It's, you're hollering at people, come on, get in line, this is what we're doing, yada, yada, yada. And, it works when you're paying people, and even then it doesn't even work that well. But you're trying to constantly motivate people to do something they don't want to do, or they don't feel called to do, or they don't feel that God's putting them in line to do that. Whereas inspiration takes the fan that's within the heart of the person already. And that's the thing that I love about church people, is there's so much heart and there's so much passion within our people. The trouble is we're trying to get them to do things they don't want to do, and so we're dissipating that flame of empowerment, power that's there.
I'm not sure that what you're saying, which I agree is a model that I resonate with. How do you do that without dropping the term regional church or region?
Well, let's
a whole new language, or a whole new vocabulary. A new paradigm needs some new words.
And see, this is absolutely the direction that we're trying to get going. And that is, you're going to be the people that create the environment by which this happens. You know, it's not done from an edict. It's not done by writing a document. It's done by creating atmosphere and by behaving that way in a new way. Yeah. Ooh, this is getting fun. We're way off script now, but this is fun.
Sorry. In
Go ahead.
thinking about this little curve and the things that you have to, for things to change, you have to give up so much. And so I was sitting here thinking, to change, to transform, to change that paradigm, what are we, giving up? And I'm a Gen Xer, but I happen to enjoy authority, and I think that's one of the things that I know. It makes me feel like I'm empowered to have, in the model of top-down stuff. One of the things that's always bothered me about disciples of Christ in general is just that there is no real authority to say. So as a pastor in a church, I can say something, right, but not be backed up by the broader church. And so you'd have to give that, I think, to change the paradigm, you'd have to give that feeling like you're being supported by something greater and broader than yourself.
And I can tell you, working across denominational lines, it's a two-edged sword. I know. Yeah. In the Presbyterian Church, the reason we do 140 new beginnings a year is because Presbyterian executive tells the church they're doing new beginnings. And they write the check and they do it. Whereas with the disciple church, we've got to vote on it 6 ways a Sunday before we can make our decision to do it.
But that's kind of what makes me feel empowered is knowing that I have a structure behind me.
Right.
That's not just gonna. So
let's keep that in mind too. Oh man, we're going crazy here.
Well, and still feeling like I'm new to the region, and what I hear that I think would be something else in that empowerment and inspiration is systematic trust. And for things to come from the bottom up, it's a notion of systematic trust that I can call Erin Wathen, because I have that trust with her, and I don't know, it always feels like because there are so many of us, that it's this competition, right? Which, because I have trust, I have folks who live in Olathe and said, well, if that's a better place for you, maybe you ought to go there. And she did the same for me, of church folks down in St. Andrews who live in this neighborhood, she said, maybe you ought to be there, and because it might not be what we do, but maybe we've got somebody who would fit really well with Terrell. Or because I know him, I trust him in what he's doing. And I just hear that there is not a trust, and maybe I'm wrong in that, but I have heard, I guess I would say, a systematic distrust of one another in this region. Maybe I'm off on that, but
I think
but I have.
You talked about people with hurt feelings about the way things have transpired in the past and stuff like that. That's usually an indicator. Trust is a resource. When I work with congregations on a congregational level, we not only measure the financial capabilities and numbers of people and building size and other resources that they have. We consider trust to be a resource.
And we can do that here because we are so close.
Yeah.
We can really build relationships with new churches and old churches and big churches and little churches because we are so close together.
And I'm looking forward to you doing that. And I just want to say, though, on the other side of the equation is that recently we had to make a painful decision, a whole partnership, to do away with one of our services, which is called The Journey, which we're doing here in Kansas City. This is one of our last regions that we've been able to do that with. And the reason for that is it takes us 3 or 4 years to get enough congregations that want to work together on a church development process. It took us, almost 3 years here in this region to finally get it up off the ground. And so by the time, if we were to add the actual cost of getting churches to work together on something together, then that really just kind of adds phenomenally to the cost of actually doing the service. So we just had to make a very difficult decision not to do that because we know that these clergy care groups and peer groups and stuff really work well for the pastors that are engaged in it, and it's a lifesaver for many. And so we've got these people in our barn now that we're trying to figure out other things to do. But I just want to say that the thing that's great about congregational autonomy is the way that you can empower local congregations, you can make quick decisions and stuff. The lousy thing about it is we all think we're an island at times. and we need to do things by ourselves. rather
Two
than-
things, one short, one a little more involved.
Yeah.
Another difference between motivation and inspiration
Yeah.
is that motivation can be either positive or negative.
It could be. Yeah,
And-
we're gonna
and
beat you if you, or slap
Inspiration
you.
is creative.
Very good.
Secondly, in terms of support, when you're doing something that maybe I'm not quite sure what it is, if we have an identity that is dynamic, which means that we are in process, always in process, then we support ministry. We don't support a particular thing. In the classic example of paradigm shift, which is what we are involved in right now. You don't change that model of who you are without taking risks, without making some wrong decisions that you have to back off from, and you don't do it without having heretics and without having loose cannons.
Yep.
And if we can realize that and affirm people,
Yeah.
then we have a better chance of providing that support.
Okay, Rob, you can give him $5 for that, and now you're even. Okay, there we go.
I was going to follow
Let's keep going, because we're way behind. Go
on
ahead.
this and say that to do that, you have to sometimes say, I'm sorry. And you have to be authentic with people when you meet them and hear what they experienced before that you weren't aware of. Or that it's a culture that you're not familiar with. And you were offensive in that setting, but you didn't even know it. So there's a lot of sensitivity and openness that we need to be able to sit together and say, no, we are at the table together.
I miss the sensitivity class. I'm just such a doofus at this stuff sometimes.
I just want to say that as a what I feel like as a product of the bottom up,
Yeah.
and I'm aware of a lot of things that the region has done because I've so heavily inserted myself.
Yeah.
But as a product of the bottom up, I just would like to see there be greater balance where, yes, there is the room to be creative and everything else like that, but then from the top there are the resources and tools, so that I'm just not rogue and I have to go and figure all this out by trial and error.
Yeah.
And so if that could conjoin more seamlessly, then it would be more effective on both ends.
It's kind of like, there's this beautiful picture I have of somebody that's kayaking through a pass in Alaska. And you've got these two cliffs coming down to the water and the edge. And it's kind of like those cliffs on the edge need to be kind of the boundaries that we set. We can set boundaries, but there's a whole lot of different ways that you can approach that pass. A whole lot of different ways that you can do it. It's about allowing people to have that middle ground so that people can identify it. I'm going to move us on if that's okay. This is a stimulating conversation though, and I think I'm getting excited because I feel like you guys get where we're trying to go with this whole thing. That we're not trying to go back and support an institution, but that we're trying to create a movement for wholeness in a